Hello, folks, and welcome back to Flop Warning. I'm your host, Luke Donovan, and joining me today, Owen Graham and Elias Corey. Just a sweet 16 teams remain after the first two rounds have concluded in this year's March Madness. And yet again, it did not disappoint. Owen, what are your thoughts on the first two rounds?
Yeah, not a lot of upsets and not a lot of high seeds, which was something that people kind of thought was going to happen going into this tournament, especially with some of the paths. You look at UConn, Purdue's path is a little tough, but UNC also. But our highest seed stands at 11, I think, with NC State, which they were definitely a team that me personally, I had some doubts, but now that they're there, good for them to get to the Sweet 16. But other than that, you could argue with Clemson at 6, but just kind of the best ranked teams and the top highest ranked teams for the most part are seeing their way in the Sweet 16, other than the Kentucky Wildcats. Jack Goldkey owns you guys now, but it's been a fun tournament to watch so far. A few upsets here and there. I think the best shot that I've seen was last night's. Give me a sec.
A&M.
A&M, the A&M to tie. But other than that, not a ton of crazy plays, but it's been a really fun tournament to watch so far, and I'm excited for these next few rounds for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you talked about the lack of upsets, and I think that sets up the rest of the tournament to be even better, because sometimes you get these, higher seeds, and eventually they run into the Purdue's and UConns and Houstons of the world.
Those high seeds have fared fairly well against Purdue in the recent years, just throwing that out there.
Well,
normally a team has to run into somebody decent.
That's a fair point, Elias. You make a very fair point.
I do. I think the biggest upset of the tournament was probably Purdue over Grambling State.
I mean, what makes you say that?
It's just their track record. Purdue has a history. I mean, for the last 5 years, they've lost to a double-digit seed. So I expect to see Purdue, NC State in the Final Four, and I expect DJ Burns to sun Zach Edey. It's how it goes, and of course it's a gambler's fallacy to say that because something has happened over and over again, it's bound to happen again. But in the same vein, you can't say, oh well, Purdue's lost to a double-digit seed for the last 5 years, surely not this year. No, it's going to happen. It's the same.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to happen. The only shot would be to do that against NC State, but. One of the other underdogs that I kind of want to harp in on real quick is Clemson. They're the only team that has been the underdog in both of their games so far. They were an underdog as a 6 seed against New Mexico, who was really hot, kind of blew them out, and then was able to beat Baylor. And I think they've been very impressive so far. I didn't really know. I wasn't tapped in on the Clemson basketball scene 6 days ago.
Yeah, I will say they've got a really tough matchup against Arizona coming up, though. I think a lot of the doubt with Arizona coming into this tournament was how, Caleb Love was going to shoot, and especially if he was going to be consistent. He's been pretty good so far, but I think the rest of the team has really performed well. I think Kylan Boswell is having himself a pretty good tournament so far through these first two games. He's not really playing true to his point guard position. He's not one to facilitate a lot, but he's done his job in his first couple of games. And anytime when you go against a team like Dayton, which can really burn you from the 3-point line, and you come away with a 10-point victory, it's got to be recognized. So that region for me stands out with that potential maybe North Carolina and Arizona matchup. But UNC,
the Caleb Love's game.
That would be a really that would be the one to watch in that Elite Eight if it does happen. But UNC has to get through Alabama first, who could also make some noise on the offensive end, but their defense is kind of a liability. So, Arizona, a lot of momentum. I worry for the Clemson Tigers in that one, but we'll see how it goes. It's March. A lot of things can happen.
I don't know. I mean, I'm somebody who, in most of my brackets, had Clemson, falling in the first round to that New Mexico team. I was super high on the Lobos coming into this tournament, but obviously didn't pan out. But the thing I like about Clemson is they score inside out. Like they've got a guy, just a big bruiser with PJ Hall on the inside who can score on anybody and can step out if he needs to shoot in that mid-range spot. I mean, just a super offensive or super effective and efficient offensive threat. But then you've also got guys on the outside like Joe Girard and Chase Hunter who can, provide you a lot of scoring from the perimeter. I mean, between those two guys, they took 379 threes already this year. 239 of that is Joe Girard. That's a ridiculous number of threes for just two guys if one of them isn't named Jack Golke. So I like that, their offense can go a number of different ways to score points, because I think that is going to, like, when you can diversify your attack in March, you're going to be that much more dangerous, especially because they're a reasonably efficient defensive team. I mean, the metrics are pretty good all over the board. They're 38th in defensive efficiency in KenPom, 25th in adjusted efficiency offensively. These are, like, as unpredictable as college basketball is, there's a predictability in metrics. Stats don't lie. And when you are pretty high in both offensive and defensive efficiency, your record doesn't really come into account when it's, this time of year, because it's just who's going to show up on a given day. And their stats, if they hold true, this is a team that can make an Elite Eight, Final Four type run.
I mean, that's why they're only, not favored against Arizona, at least on KenPom, by only 5 points. So, I mean, they're definitely not counting them out. But, yeah, Arizona, I think, just takes it in my book just because of, how well they've played going into this weekend. They had that kind of tough first half in their first round of 64 matchup, but since then they've been pretty efficient. And I would take Arizona in this one.
We have talked a lot about Jack Golke, the star, the Oakland Star, who had 10 threes in that upset win against Kentucky. Who are some other guys on your guys' short list here that have had great games in the tournaments? Who are your game balls going to so far?
Go ahead, Owen.
All right. Such a gentleman. I appreciate that. For Gonzaga, Anton Watson. I think he has really shown out. That team is kind of lacking, I guess, a go-to guy for the most part, because, they have a pretty good starting lineup with EK, Watson, Nembhard, to name a few. But Watson, I think, has really been efficient so far, and I think that's going to be key, especially when they're playing Purdue, who's, going to do pretty well on the defensive end and obviously going to burn you on the offensive end with that tall man in the middle. So, if he can stay efficient, that's going to give them a big chance in that matchup. Another guy that has flown a little under the radar, but I just love watching him play, Zakai Ziegler on Tennessee. He doesn't score like a lot of points, but he is the definition of your point guard that you want on that team. He doesn't score a lot, but he is so quick with the ball. He's shifty. He can facilitate. He rebounds. He assists. He does all the intangibles right. His turnovers are a little bit on the negative side, but other than that, I watch him. I love watching him play, especially with that Tennessee squad, who has a really, if you just look at the names of their starting lineup, it's a pretty good starting lineup. So I think he brings that kind of core well together, and I liked what I've seen from him so far in the tournament.
Yeah, I think he makes Tennessee. Yeah. Obviously, you have the guy, Dalton Knecht, who can go and give you 20, 30 points a game, and, he's the big weapon offensively. But this is a defensive team, and that is because of Zakai Ziegler for sure. Switching off of the defense, though, I want to go to a guy who just got eliminated, Jermaine Couisnard for Oregon. He was absolutely disgusting, phenomenal performance. Former South Carolina Gamecock, dropped 40 on his former team, had 6 assists in that one as well. Added 32 more against Creighton. Only 2 turnovers in those games, 1 in each. Just absolutely phenomenal point guard play from that guy. And Oregon on their mini run.
Yeah. And you said 40, right?
Yeah.
He dropped 40?
40.
That's I don't know if we'll see that from Caleb Love if he makes that UNC game, but it's a tough one to do. I feel like there's got to be something in the back of your mind where it's like, shoot, man, I'm playing against my old team. Like, do I go off or do I just have like a respectable performance? I mean, it's all. I would say it's pretty tough. Like, just playing against your old team, and you're like, man, I really got to survive during tournament time. I'm gonna have to drop 40 on your dome. But yeah, Couisnard that first round unconscious, and it's tough to see him go.
Him and Nafali Dante were an incredible duo for the Ducks in their 2 games.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've just got to go with the guy who's really burst onto the scene lately. They weren't going to be a tournament team. They won 5 games in 5 days. What is it, 7-12 now? Give me DJ Burns. Now, I know you're probably thinking I was going to switch it up and say DJ Horn there. No, you weren't. It's DJ Burns all the way. Questions about his motor have been season long, but especially into the last, really 2 weeks, because they've been playing so many games in so many days. And he was only looking at, 20 to 25 minutes a game because they didn't think he'd be able to handle it. Played 42 minutes against Oakland, an inefficient 42 minutes. Offensive rating of 150. That would put him at the top of the country for individual offensive rating for the season. If that was obviously elongated throughout the entire.
They're also playing Oakland.
They were playing Oakland.
Yeah,
but
Oakland also beat Kentucky.
Oakland also beat Kentucky.
That's
yeah.
fair.
All right. I mean, when you're coming up against a powerhouse like Jack Golke, he was the best offensive player on the court. Obviously, Trey Townsend had 30, but Burns was more efficient. He went 9 of 12 from 2. He did not miss a 3. He didn't attempt one. 6 of 7 from the free throw line is really impressive for a big guy, and not just a big guy, the big man's big man. I love the way that DJ Burns has been playing. Just, underrated footwork, gets into his spot, gets deep into the post, then it's just able to bully just about every opposing defender. That's why, I'll be honest, I like NC State in their upcoming matchup in the Sweet 16 with Marquette, because who's Marquette's center?
Oso
Ighodaro.
He's built like me.
He's a twig.
Yeah.
As talented as Ighodaro is, I don't know if he can handle DJ Burns. And the thing about Burns is he's not just like a bully. He can pass the ball exceptionally well. And so I like the quickness of that team on back cuts. I like DJ Horn as a secondary scorer, which feels weird to say because he was one of the best scorers in the ACC this year. So I don't know. I really like DJ Burns, what he's done so far. I like that he's sort of proved some doubters wrong with that 42-minute game. That was really cool.
I'm just wondering where that ice cream sundae went because after did you guys see that post-game interview?
I did not.
Oh my goodness. Did you?
As well.
Okay. So after every game, apparently DJ Burns eats an ice cream sundae.
This
guy's living my life.
after the post-game interview, I don't know who was interviewing him, but they gave him an ice cream sundae and he refused. He's like, the job's not finished yet or something like that.
Well, they probably just in the locker room.
Yeah.
He probably snuck it back.
Yeah. I mean, he's not. He said, "No, I am not going to eat this." Coach, you mind holding that version?
I'm just wondering where that went, but yeah, DJ Burns, absolute dog. I love the comparisons to Zach Randolph. The junkyard dog kind of feeling.
Did you say chunkyard dog?
Junkyard.
I know, but if you had said chunkyard, that would have been hilarious. My gosh, what a missed opportunity!
Wow.
Maybe I did. I'll just claim that I did. But yeah, it like you said, it feels weird calling DJ Horn the secondary scorer on that team, just because with how good DJ Burns has been. So, I don't know if I would go as far as to say they're going to beat Marquette, but I respect the process behind it, and I do think it's going to be a good game. It'll be competitive for sure, definitely in the trenches.
And then just a couple interesting things. Sorry, from that matchup, Jaden Taylor, Indianapolis native, attended Butler, didn't really have get much of a foot in Butler, transfers to NC State now. He's making an impact there. That's really cool to see. Who else forgot Rocket Watts existed?
Me.
Anybody?
I raised my hand because he was on Oakland, right?
He's on Oakland.
And he comes off the bench, doesn't he?
Yeah. Isn't that weird? That's insane. Like when I found out earlier in the season that Noah Farrakhan plays for West Virginia. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
That's what I love about March, man. Some of these guys just start cropping up. I bet a reasonable portion of the country didn't know Max Asmus wasn't on Oral Roberts anymore.
He's on Texas.
I followed that pretty well, but
I mean, we're basketball fans, but people who don't watch the SEC might not know.
It's fair.
Yeah.
It's fair.
All right, we gotta talk about this freshman though, Jared McCain. How about his last couple of games? He was 15-6 against Vermont. He was tied for the leading scorer in that game, but whatever. That game's not very important compared to what he did against James Madison, dropping 30. Missing nothing from the perimeter. And he said it was hard not to shoot from anywhere. He was 8 from 11 for 3. I don't know which record. I think it was multiple, like most 3.5. Freshman Duke record, Duke tournament record for 3s. Absurd performance from Jared McCain. And he has been really playing well. And Duke looks really good right now.
He's 2 games into the tournament and his opponents are behind. I mean, this is really just a different kind of player from what we've seen at Duke in a really long time. I mean, normally they've got, the Grayson Allens, the Kyle Filipowskis, who want to seem tougher than they are. Jared McCain is perfectly fine not looking tough. I mean, he's going to sing off the court, and he's going to give you 30 on the court. Like, it's just really exciting to watch this new sort of brand of basketball at Duke. I tweeted about this yesterday just on the subject of Duke. I saw a little boy. Owen, did you see that tweet?
No, I'm just still laughing about your TikTok reference. What did you say?
He's 2 games into the tournament and his opponents are behind.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay, sorry, continue. I didn't see your tweet. No, what'd you say?
Well, I saw this little boy fall down at church and skin his knee. And he just popped right back up and said, I'm fine. And I just can't help but think that would have put Kyle Filipowski out for 3-4 weeks.
Do you not like Duke or something?
I don't like Kyle Filipowski.
Oh, my gosh. You cracked me up, dude.
No, I mean, if we're being honest, he's an inspiration. I mean, to assault a fan and be back later in the week is truly inspirational. Truly.
Okay. Well, back on the Jared McCain story. Yeah, very productive shooting night. It's hard to transition with you, Elias. Against James Madison, yeah, they kind of dominated that entire game. But I feel like Jared McCain's development was going to take the entire season, if that makes sense. I don't think he was going to be that, go-to star coming out.
So many talented
players. And especially with Duke and Tyrese Proctor and Jeremy Roach still on that team, but he was going to kind of not be that first option for sure, especially with Filipowski also on that team. But the development through the season, the trust with the head coach, and just how well he's performed in these first 2 games, I think we're really starting to show why Jared McCain was so highly rated coming out of high school and why he starts for this Duke team.
I mean, are you really surprised? Could we not have really seen it coming that he was going to shine when they call it the dance?
You're absurd. You're absurd. All right. We're transitioning. Next little segment here. A little bit off the court action. Owen, I know you wanted to talk about Jim Nance.
And it's so goofy.
And him being caught cheering on the Houston Cougars.
It just doesn't feel right. Like, he should not be in the stands cheering on a team if he's still, commentating golf, which he does very well, and football. Get back in the booth, man. Come on. We miss your voice, dude. I mean, it's tough seeing him in the stands. What?
That was a wild noise.
You're not allowed to.
You're so critical today.
Yep.
Announcers were going crazy.
Yeah, I mean, keep making the same noise. But Jim Nance being in the stands, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't. When I look at it, it just. I know it's his alma mater, but get back in the booth, man. We miss you. We miss you. You're the voice of college basketball. You're the voice of March Madness. Jim Nance, I miss you. I miss you.
Another fellow on-air talent that was rooting for his alma mater was Charles Barkley at halftime, smoking the cigar with no worries about Yale. In that game against Auburn, which I thought was just absolutely hilarious when Yale was able to pull that out.
Atrocious from Auburn, who has been one of the best metric performing teams in the nation this year. I mean, Auburn losing that game to Yale has effectively discredited KenPom it was that bad of a loss for their metrics. Horrendous. I mean, when you have seasoned guards like Donaldson, or I guess not guards like Donaldson, you have a guard like Donaldson, accompanied by a young buck like Aiden Holloway, who just loved to score the basketball, one of the most efficient players in the country with Janai Broome, and you can't beat Yale.
The SEC president needs to know.
The SEC commissioner, Greg Stanky.
He needs to know that March Madness is no joke.
I saw a TikTok where it was like how Yale matches up against Auburn, and then of course they got like the glasses and like the suit, like they're going for law degrees, like, oh, I'm crossing you up. This is so funny.
Watch this move, man. Well, did you guys see?
I'll give that guy a map.
Did you guys see who get like that tweet about Yale MBB?
Yeah,
the Yale
biochemistry.
Yes, the Yale Molecular Biochemistry and Biology account was receiving so many tags and tweets because their tag is Yale MBB.
Oh,
and so
that's hilarious.
Posted, we noticed we've been getting tagged a lot. You might want to try tagging Yale M basketball.
That's funny. Oh, that's funny.
Very Yale. Salt in the wound for Auburn, and I'm always happy to root against Bruce Pearl, so that was a fun one for me.
Gotta hit your free throws down the stretch though. You had those.
Yeah.
You had the chance.
Yeah.
And that's why
free shots.
That's why Joe Girard is gonna mess around.
Not miss.
No, he's 95% at the line this year.
Not miss.
114 of 120. You know what Trey Galloway shot this year?
Goodness.
Right around 50% from the line.
Catching strays.
You know what I shot in intramurals this year?
20.
No, right around 40. But I shouldn't be that close to Trey Galloway.
It's a fair point. Elias.
Moving on to at least my favorite segment. I think it's a lot of people's favorite segments. Fab and flop of the week. Elias, we'll start with you. I want to hear your fab of the week first. What's your highlight of the first two rounds?
Okay, well, until somebody gags me, I'm not going to say it's Purdue. I don't care that they beat Utah State by 39. I refuse. I think Gonzaga. I really like that Gonzaga sort of silenced a lot of that 12-5 hate with that McNeese matchup, because McNeese is obviously a team that performed very well in KenPom this year. They were, 31-3 or 30-3 heading into that matchup. A lot of people had McNeese, and I guess Gonzaga took that as a little bit disrespectful, blowing him out by 21, and then, again, a 21-point win over Kansas. Those teams are no slouch, I think. Obviously, Kansas.
I give them the credit for Kansas.
Yes.
I give them the credit.
Obviously, missing Kevin McCullough isn't going to be great for the way that team is going to perform. I think the McNeese win speaks volumes about what Gonzaga is able to do defensively, because, McNeese may not be the greatest defensive team. They don't really turn the ball over. They're not going to give you a ton of chances to score. Gonzaga made it happen against McNeese. They made it happen against Kansas. I think they could give Purdue fits next weekend.
I think Purdue will have a much harder time with Gonzaga than what you called an upset in Grambling State and Utah State. I never thought Purdue was going to be touched by either of those two games. I thought TCU would have been a bit of a harder matchup for Purdue, but they do look good. Owen, going over to you, your fab of the week. I know we've already touched on it a little bit, so you don't have to go too deep.
Yeah, DJ Burns, NC State. The performance is not something to ignore, especially when you take into consideration how they got into the tournament, like largely off the back of him in the conference tournament. But with the highest seed remaining, I had doubts. I still, have some doubts, but I got to give at least him and the team respect because it was a tough few matchups for them. They had to come away against an Oakland team who was riding a lot of momentum, beat Kentucky in that first round. And prior to that, they had to face a Texas Tech team, which, they have some history in the tournament, and they've been good in recent years. So for NC State, I think it's a very intriguing matchup along the way. We kind of touched on it already with the center matchup between Burns and Ighodaro, but I don't know if it's enough to make some noise and ultimately come over the top on Marquette, but something to be recognized, especially for the first two rounds.
And now switching gears to the other side, the flop of the week, the most embarrassing moments. I'm going to start here with a first round game, a 7 versus 10 matchup in which Nevada decided to stop playing basketball about 3/4 of the way through that game. They were up 17 on Dayton. They ended up losing 63-60. The Flyers ended on a 24-4 run and just got outplayed down the stretch. Dayton came back from the dead in that one, and it was an emotional win for them. Obviously, they couldn't beat Arizona, but Nevada, you got to close that game out up 17 in the second half.
Horrendous.
Yep, can't have that.
However, I was one of those people who picked Dayton and turned the game off and went to go make dinner with my sister. Checked the score, almost flew out the window. That was because I saw that they were down 14 and watched the remainder of it. I was shaking and I hadn't had any caffeine for the day. But for my flop, this is more a flop of the selection committee, but I've got to go with Virginia in the play-in. What a horrible showcase of basketball.
Yeah, that's kind of on me for not recognizing that we had a show prior to their game, and because I was definitely going to talk about that. But
goodness.
Sorry,
no, you're good. You're good.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just going to throw some numbers at you. Virginia in their whole game against Colorado State, 42 points.
Ugh.
Indiana State in the first half against SMU, 41. In the second half, 61. No, 60. Was it 40 and 61? I think they scored 101.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
Either way, Indiana State outscored Virginia by nearly 20 in a half of what Virginia played. And we let this team play Colorado State to get into the tournament. Virginia had no business being anywhere near the bubble, and yet they were given this spot. And I'd be embarrassed if I were this Virginia roster, because I don't think they really surely they can't have thought that they earned that spot or were going to do anything to give Colorado State fits.
Did you see the reaction video of them in the locker room?
Mm-mm.
Oh my gosh, you would have thought they won the national championship. Not the entire team was in it. It was mostly staff watching their big TV in their locker room or whatever. And they figured out they made the tournament and they went bananas.
They should have. That's
not,
why it wasn't a full.
They did not know. They did not know they were supposed to be in the tournament, which, granted, definitely shouldn't have been.
They did not belong in the tournament.
A 14-point half in March Madness is just disrespectful.
That's how you start off a tournament.
It's horrible to the fans. It's awful for the fans to watch. I mean, I turned that game off, and I love college basketball. But these are the teams that Greg Sankey, is that his name? No, Greg Sankey, the SEC commissioner. These are the teams that he thinks belong in March, not the mid-majors that win their conference tournaments. No, these middle-of-the-pack power conference teams that are just going to get blown out. That's who Greg Sankey wants.
Yeah, I agree with you, Elias. It was awful. It was awful to watch.
Wow.
But I'm going to go ahead with my flop. I think the two upsets in Auburn and Kentucky, especially, you have to look at. Kentucky's defensive performance was just atrocious. Again, I will mention TikTok in this, but have you guys seen any awful coaching videos that the guy usually comments on the Detroit Pistons? But he took the time out of his day to make an 8-minute video of why John Calipari's and Kentucky's defense was just absolutely awful. And the main reason, to sum it up from what I got from it, is that on every elevator screen and every screen that they ran from Golke or any other shooter, at no point did Kentucky jam the screen. So they're just letting them pass through and get an open shot. And he just goes on a rant. He's like, Golke, he made 100 threes, and this is why Kentucky just was terrible. And it was entertaining. But I kind of have to also shine some light on FAU, especially with how do I want to word this? How much expectation they had coming into the season. A lot of that died down when they got into the tournament, but everyone was saying, oh, they're going to make a run. They're going to make a run. Dusty May's got them. Not the most talented roster and not the most, complete team, I would guess, but they have a lot of retaining minutes from their last season's team that made the Final Four, and they run into Northwestern. Boo Boo, he just goes crazy on them. So I think you got to shed some light on that. I think it's obviously not a good thing when you exit the first round, but because of the expectation, I think they definitely underperformed, and I personally did not see them going out in the first round.
Yeah, I heard, I think it was the Jets say that like the 8-9 game is usually like a little second chance game for some teams that disappointed. I mean, for Northwestern, it was the Ty Berry injury, and for FAU, it was just a disappointing season after being so good last year. And Ryan Langford and Boot Bowie,
wow,
really put on a show. Get those two with some popcorn and rewatch that game because they went crazy, especially in overtime. Langborn was just stupid.
And I mean, we can't talk about FAU without talking about, I mean, just the blockbuster or the news that Dusty May leaving FAU for Michigan, of all places to coach, Michigan.
I knew there was a lot of word on Louisville. I think that was the popular one going around, but
would have been really cool to see him at Louisville.
Yeah, it was a really big swing, but I think the hire is good. I think it's a big thing is restructuring the culture.
Yes,
I think with both of those programs, you can make that argument. And so I think he's the right guy to do it. I have some concerns just with how, he's performed. The FAU run last year was kind of like, just they did what they had to do. But then you look at this year and, kind of underperformed. So I'm curious. I think he'll do well, but time will tell. Of course, we'll probably have an upcoming podcast episode about coaching carousels like transfer portal. But that one definitely, since we're on the topic of FAU, definitely needs some white. So. Yeah.
And I mean, that roster is going to take some rebuilding now. Mm-hmm. I mean, especially with Doug McDaniel hitting the portal recently. And
Terrace Reed.
Yep. Yeah. Dusty May's got quite the offseason ahead of him.
Yeah. Stepping out of the big dance just for a quick second here. I know you guys both have a team in the NIT that you guys want to talk about. Elias, I'm going to start with you, because I know you're going to have some interesting things to say.
Who's he going to be?
Well, I mean, I've been riding this team's coattails since November, maybe early December, but I really think it was November. It's Indiana State. I mean, this is the best team in the NIT. They'd be, in my opinion, they would still be playing right now. Had they been granted a spot in the NCAA tournament?
If they were in Virginia's spot, would they still be in?
Well, they shouldn't have been in a play-in in the first place.
No, I feel like they would have been given a 9 or a 10. Really, this roster is incredible. They're one of the best offensive teams in the country as far as just pure scoring. I mean, they're the only team in the nation that is top 12 in 3-point percentage, 2-point percentage, and free throw percentage, in which they are number 1 in 2-point percentage and number 2 in free throw percentage, number 1 in the country in effective field goal percentage. This is the team that we deserved to watch in the NCAA tournament they have, last I checked, they had 5 players. It may be 4 now. This is ridiculous. 4 players in the top 40 in true shooting percentage in the country. That's a 1,200 player pool. Indiana State is going to win the NIT, and they're going to prove to the selection committee that they made a mistake.
Well, I definitely don't disagree with you that they'll get to the final game and probably win it, but I got to give some props out to Seton Hall, and their side of the bracket. I like them with, I think it's UNLV and then the winner of Ohio State and Georgia. I think you give some props to Indiana State, but I think Seton Hall has the most complete team in the tournament. I think those are the final 2 teams, Seton Hall and Indiana State. So I'm curious to see that matchup. And just give props to whoever selected the NIT location this year, because having it at Hinkle Fieldhouse, if you've ever been there, it's a good arena. And when Butler has a pretty good big home game, it gets loud. So props to that, and having it in Indiana is obviously nice. But I got Seton Hall, Indiana State. I think Indiana State takes it. I agree with you, Elias, but Seton Hall is going to give them a run for their money. I'll say that much.
Looking back now to the big dance, looking ahead to the Sweet 16, Owen, what is your most anticipated matchup coming up on the dial?
Houston versus Duke. I had my eye on Purdue and Gonzaga. I think It'll definitely be competitive, but not as much as Houston and Duke, I think, will be. Houston had some trouble dealing with A&M. Granted, they had a lot of fouls called on them, like a ton, and I think they gave up 40-plus free throws and had, 4 people foul out in overtime? Yeah. It was a lot. But Duke has had some questions going into the tournament. They're coming off of course, a dominant win against JMU. I think if there were going to be a team to beat Houston before they get to the Final Four, it would be Duke. I don't see either of the other two teams in that Marquette and NC State games really giving a run at Houston, but I think if it were a team to beat, it would be Duke and their offense. So that's the one I have circled on my calendar.
How about you, Elias?
I really like that NC State Marquette matchup. I think if NC State wins, it's going to be a close one, but there's definitely blowout potential for Marquette. Across the board, you just sort of see that Marquette roster is a little more talented, a little more complete, a little more polished, but that NC State roster is battle tested. 7 games in 12 days. Now they're going to get a little bit of a rest. DJ Burns is going to get himself a milkshake, and he's going to be fueled up and ready to go against Oso Ighodaro. I really like that matchup to see a potential upset. But I do think there's definitely potential for Marquette to just sort of slam the door on the Cinderella of the Wolfpack.
The last game that I'm going to touch on here is got to be UConn San Diego State. It's the national championship rematch, and I feel like no one is acknowledging that. San Diego State almost has like the same team. Jaden Ledee is an all-star. Obviously, UConn is doing UConn right now, so I'm pretty excited for that game. Obviously, I think that UConn could 100% blow anybody out, but I think Reese Waters is a big player for San Diego State to watch in this one. He's had a really bad tournament so far, so if he can turn that around, I think San Diego State might be able to compete, but outside of that.
Yeah, I do agree with you that it's kind of going under the radar that the national championship is a rematch, but, it's hard to give any sort of game to the other team that's facing UConn because UConn, as you said, UConn is doing UConn right now. So my team coming out of that region was Auburn. Of course, that didn't really last very well, but
I think that's the quietest region.
Oh, for sure.
I haven't heard anything about Iowa State, which is good as a 2 seed. Illinois has been balling. Terrence Shannon's a beast, but
yeah.
Final segment of the day, shot clock time. Elias, I think you should go first.
I always go last.
Go last?
I don't have anything yet, so I think
Luke, you go ahead.
Right. We get weird and make Luke.
We do get weird.
All right.
This is our show now.
Yeah, I got a timer. Okay. I got you.
Owen's got me.
Here we go.
Mine's pretty straightforward.
All right, you ready?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, go.
Let's go with the Big East. 6-0 right now in the tournament. UConn, Marquette, Creighton. Where are the other teams? There were too many of them on the wrong side of the bubble, and I think that's a tragedy because I think they could have won more than just 6 games so far. But the 3 best teams in the Big East might all make the Final Four. That would not be surprising to me at all. Creighton, Tennessee is going to be a very good matchup. I love Baylor Shireman. And I'm hopping on the Big East bandwagon.
Plenty of time to spare. Also, 1 second, probably got it off, and who knows what would happen. But you definitely got it off in time for sure. No review needed. I have a little bit of an idea. It might sound a little bit out of the ordinary, but I'll go ahead and go with it. If someone wants to give me a timer.
3, 2, 1.
Is a conversation to be had about firing John Calipari? You cannot give up a loss to Oakland with that seeding at that time. And this is not the first time that it happened. And you had St. Peter's earlier, I think 2 years ago, and you've underperformed in the tournament in the recent years. I think a conversation should be had. Also, if Purdue faces any type of adversary in the tournament in the next coming days, I think a conversation could be made about Matt Painter as well.
Well, you definitely got a offensive rebound
board. Yep.
Back in, but we'll give it to you. Interesting. I think it's hard to fire a coach of that caliber, but certainly with the recent tournament failures, it's definitely a conversation that probably should happen, but I don't know if you actually pull the trigger.
At least a discussion should be made. And I think that would I said Purdue, but I forgot that they were on the bottom right and not with NC State. But if they lost to NC State somehow, that would have been tough. But anyways.
Well, Purdue has no chance of losing to NC State. They will not make it that far. NC State is a Final Four lock. Purdue not so much.
Okay. But I want to hear your opinion real quick on this, guys. If Purdue lost to Grambling State, would you have a discussion?
Yes.
With Matt Painter?
Yes.
I think you should. I would pray that they didn't, so that he sticks around and continues to lose to more
You're saying all
double-digit
this
teams.
like they're not going to win, which they very realistically could.
I just like
Purdue?
Yeah.
I just like assessing the opinion on that because I think you do pretty well in conference play with Purdue and how well they've done this season, but then you get to tournament time and you lose in the first few rounds, then what's the point? So I don't know.
It's hard to win a national championship, and it's hard to improve on coaches of that caliber.
Yeah.
I think it'll be really interesting to see if the conversation starts after next year when Edey's not there.
Yeah. That's true.
Granted, they already have a 7-3 big man with Wilberg on the roster and another 4-star 7-2 player on the way in. So it'll be interesting to see how that sort of plays out.
All right, Elias, are you ready to go?
Ready as I'll ever be.
3,
Bring it home, John B.
2, 1.
We need to close the transfer portal or keep it closed until after the NCAA tournament has finished. Because, you look at the number of teams that have declined the NIT because they want to get a head start in the portal. They want to, see what they can do to start building their roster for next year. That makes the NIT, just pointless unless you're Indiana State, who's now going to be behind when it comes to the portal, and they're presumably going to lose several players. Close the portal. I know the outset of NIT makes it difficult, but close the portal earlier.
Just in time.
I agree.
Nice job.
Open it later, not close it earlier.
I agree 100% because Iowa State already has 2 commitments somehow from the portal. Alabama, I know, got 1, but that is impressive on their part. But also, if you close it and just wait till the tournament's over, then everyone can have kind of a free chance. And I think,
there's no problem.
There's no problem with everyone having a free chance for sure. But especially, with the NIT, you need to wait till it finishes. You need to wait for the NCAA tournament to finish so you can have all those players just enter at once. And they may argue for the limited transfer portal window, but I feel like it would still extend. I think it goes to May something.
Yeah.
So that's still plenty of time to assess and see what your roster needs and reach out to players. So I agree with you, Elias.
And that's what a lot of teams have to do.
Yeah.
If you get an NCAA tournament bid, you're not declining it to focus on the portal. So any team that makes the tournament and makes a deep run is put at a pretty hefty disadvantage.
You almost have to assess one assistant coach to just contact these portal recruits, and it's poorly organized. I think I agree with you. Yeah,
that's all the time we've had today. Was quite a episode, I would say myself. A shout out to our producer Josh Bodie for producing today. We'll be back on Wednesday for the women's edition of the Flop Warning. Thank you so much for tuning in.